welcome to Botany 101. My name is Angela Nishimoto. Okay, so for today's topics, we're doing water in plants. Okay, and there'll be an addendum at the end of this too. So for water in plants, the outline of topics include diffusion and osmosis, active transport, water in plants and how the plant uses water, stomates, remember those stomatopores through which carbon dioxide usually moves into the plant and oxygen gas moves out of the plant through the leaves of the stomates of the leaves or the stems. And then we're going to talk about some essential elements. Okay? So to begin with, okay, molecules and ions are constantly in random motion, even if they're not really alive. Even if they're non-living, molecules are constantly in motion in the gases, in liquids, and even in solids, even though in solids, molecules are moving much more slowly than in a liquid or in a gas. Now, Brownian movement is an illustration of this concept of random molecular movement. Okay, so if you actually put water and India ink on a slide, all right, and you get the slide and put a cover slip on it and you look at it under a microscope, you'll see that generally the dark brown India ink molecules, which are fairly large and are visible at high power under the light microscope, they're actually moving. Okay, they're sort of recoiling, because what's actually happening on the slide is that water molecules are moving around, okay, just like the India molecules are moving around. The water molecules are ricocheting off the India molecules, which are causing them to make this kind of jiggling movement. Okay, that's Brownian motion, which illustrates the concept of random molecular movement. All right. Now, diffusion, okay, is a movement of a substance or molecules from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration through random motion. Okay, so molecules become distributed within the space available, right? Such as perfume or cologne. Okay, if you have a perfume bottle with a stopper in it, the perfume molecules are distributed within the bottle. If you take the stopper out of the bottle, the perfume molecules will become distributed throughout the room. It might take a while, but eventually the perfume molecules will be spread out evenly through the room when it reaches equilibrium. Same thing with incense and smoke. Okay, you can see the smoke from the incense here, right? And even things like cigarette smoke and like that. Okay, or smoke from a hibachi is actually localized, stronger and more thick, and you can actually see it when it's near the source of the smoke. And as it diffuses, it actually diffuses to the spaces around it. You know, the molecules or incense are hitting each other, hitting other molecules in the air, okay, and it eventually becomes distributed in the space that's available to it, even without a fan, okay? Now, osmosis is actually a special case of diffusion, but first of all, okay, solvent is a substance in which something is dissolved, such as water, okay? A solute is a substance that is dissolved, so a solvent, such as water, or solute, such as salt, okay, if they're combined together, they make up a solution, okay? So generally, water moves freely, okay, through semi-permeable membranes, okay. So water moves freely from cell to cell, and osmosis itself is the movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration, all right. So osmosis stops or comes to an end, or there's no net movement of water through the membrane when you come to equilibrium, when there's a distribution of water molecules through both sides of the membrane that are equal, okay. So water in the cell moves by osmosis, right? And cells are usually turgid. That means that they're usually full of water, or they should be. Okay, they should be firm or swollen because of water pressure from osmosis. Okay, just think of soaking carrots and celery or lettuce in water. Makes them more crisp, makes them turgid, makes them full of water. Okay. Now the opposite of that can be called plasmolysis. Okay, if you actually put carrots and celery in a 10% sodium chloride solution, okay, so the carrots and celery would be in 10% salt, 90% water. That would be a 10% sodium chloride solution because sodium chloride is just table salt. Okay, what would happen? Okay, the carrots and celery would lose rigidity and become limp, okay, or flaccid. Okay, so when water potential or when concentration of water is greater inside the cell than outside of the cell, so then you'll have osmosis of diffusion of water through a membrane out of the cell, okay, and the cell will get plasmolyzed, or the vacuoles will disappear, as you see here. So here you see these regular cells. This is probably Elodea, which is a water plant. You see the chloroplast. You can see the cells are turgid or full of water. The cell membranes are pushed up against the cell walls. Okay, but in a solution of 10% sodium chloride, what will happen? Okay, you have a higher concentration of water inside of the cell as compared to outside of the cell in the 10% sodium chloride. So water will move from an area of higher concentration inside of the cell to outside of the cell where it's at lower concentration until equilibrium is reached. Okay, so what can happen is that the vacuoles can disappear and the cytoplasm can become clumped in the center of the cell where the cell membrane has pulled away from the cell walls, okay, shrunken away from the cell walls. Okay, now osmosis not only is not the only force involved in the absorption of water by plants. Okay, we also have imbibition. Remember we talked about imbibition last time? What that is, that's a swelling of tissues. Okay, so you can see this tissue here getting swollen, actually developing, elongating and enlarging. Okay, so large molecules such as cellulose and starch, okay, they actually, when wet, they become charged. Okay, and of course, when they're charged, they attract water molecules, okay, because water, of course, is polar, okay. So when the cellulose or the starch is charged, of course, it will attract water molecules, right? Because remember, water molecules are polar. Remember, you have the oxygen side of the water molecule, which is more electronegative, that tends to pull electrons toward itself. So there's a slight negative charge on that side of the molecule. And then because electrons are on one side of the molecule, or mostly on one side of the molecule, the other side of the molecule is positively charged. Okay, so water tends to stick to certain things that are charged, including itself, right? Okay, so remember that imbibition is actually the first step in germination, okay? And so the force from imbibition can be tremendous, can be absolutely tremendous, okay? A germinating seed can actually crack rock or crack concrete, okay? And in fact, in the past, when they were making the Egyptian pyramids, people think that how they actually quarried the rock, those huge blocks of granite, how they quarried them was to actually make holes in the rock and pound a stake, a wooden stake into there, and then wet the stake, and the stake would get swollen and would exhibit enough force to actually crack the granite. Okay, those huge blocks that they quarried for the Egyptian pyramid. Okay. Now active transport, okay, actually happens through a semi-permeable membrane. Remember that the cell membrane is a semi-permeable membrane, that it allows some things through and doesn't allow other things through, okay? So active transport is the expenditure of energy, okay? So substances such as carbon dioxide, such as oxygen, such as water, can freely cross the membrane, okay, but charged substances like ions, again, larger molecules such as glucose, need to go through transport proteins, which are embedded in the membrane. Okay, so some help to transport, substances out of the cell. Some carrier proteins serve to transport things into the cell. Okay, so plants absorb, okay, and also keep solutes against the concentration gradient through active transport, okay, where you actually have the movement of substances from an area of lower concentration to an area of higher concentration. That involves the expenditure of energy in the form of ATP. Remember we talked about ATP before? Okay. Now water movement in plants happens, remember, in the xylem. Okay. Now about more than 90% of the water that the plant takes up through the roots are actually lost through transpiration. Remember transpiration we talked about before? Right, the evaporative loss of water through the stomates of the leaf. Okay, so here we see that water in a xylem vessel goes in one direction from bottom to top. Okay, and the path of the water through a plant is from the roots into the stems and into the leaf and out of the leaf through pores in the leaf called stomates, right? Okay, so more than 90% of water that is actually taken up by the roots can be lost by the plant. Okay, one corn plant can actually transpire 4 gallons of water a week. Okay, an acre of corn can transpire 350,000 gallons of water in a 100-day growing period. Okay, if we had the same water requirements as plants did, okay, we'd have to drink about 10 gallons of water a day, which can be kind of interesting, and see if we could do that, But of course, we're not plants. But at the same time, that what we do is that we secrete or excrete water, okay, about 3 quarts per day or 3 liters per day, right? So we get about 1.5 liters of water from our food through what we eat, okay? And so we need to drink at least 1.5 liters or 1.5 quarts of water a day. Some people need more, some people need less. Okay, but remember to drink water. That's important. Okay? So why is water so important? Why do plants need so much water? Well, 90% of the weight of young cells in the plant is actually water. Okay? Also, the chemical activities in the cells happen in a water solution, an aqueous solution. Okay? Okay, there are thousands of reactions that happen in a cell, right? Also, some of the water is used for photosynthesis. Okay? Remember, photosynthesis is a harvesting of light energy and conversion of that into chemical energy. Okay? Also, the surfaces inside of the leaf need to be wet, okay, in order for it to absorb carbon dioxide, all right? So the mesophyll surfaces inside the spongy cells, remember the spongy cells? They have a lot of air spaces. That allows carbon dioxide to dissolve on the surface of the mesophyll cells, so the carbon dioxide can be incorporated and made into sugars, okay? Now sometimes more water is lost and can be taken in. Okay, so what happens? All right, the stomates will close. You remember stomates in guard cells? Okay, so the stomates will close, preventing the wilting of the plant. Okay, so here are the stomates. Okay, so when the guard cells, so the stomate is actually the hole. The stoma is a hole in the center that leads into the plant or out of the plant. Carbon dioxide usually moving into the plant, oxygen gas usually moving out of the plant. Okay? So when the guard cells are turgid, the guard cells are sort of like 2 water balloons, 2 balloons, kind of long balloons kind of tied at each end to each other. Okay? So when the balloons are full, turgid, full of water, the vacuoles are expanded, okay? and photosynthesis is happening, okay, the cell gets turgid because potassium flows into the guard cells and water follows because it wants the same solute concentration inside the cell as well as outside of the cell. So then the stomate opens, okay? When photosynthesis is not happening, all right, what happens is that the potassium ions leave the guard cells, okay, water follows, and the two guard cells sort of become flaccid and the stomate closes, okay? Now, how does water travel up a plant? 1 foot, 5 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, or 300 feet, because there are some trees that are 300 feet tall, okay? So this man named Stephen Hales, okay, got the idea of root pressure, okay? If you prune a stem, okay, water can exude from it when you prune it during the springtime, okay? But some plants don't actually bleed after you cut them so much, okay? Also, root pressure generally is less than a few pounds per square inch, so that's really not enough to explain how water gets up to 300 feet, okay, up to the top of the plant. Okay, so we have what they call the cohesion tension theory. Now, Stephen Hales is also the person who noted a pulling force from evaporation from the leaves. Okay, recall that the water molecules are polar, what we talked about a little earlier. Okay, so they're polar, so they're charged or partially charged at each end. Okay, so what happens is that they tend to stick together. Okay, so water molecules stick together, okay, and something called cohesion, or sticking together, okay. Now, water molecules also stick to the xylem walls in a process known as adhesion, okay. So you see this nice illustration here where the water molecules are hydrogen bonded to each other, and they're hydrogen bonding also to the sides of this, this tube that it's in, okay? So water molecules are polar. They stick together, and they also stick to other things, okay, as an adhesion, all right? Now, what happens is that water evaporates. Okay, you have diffusion out of the stoma, okay, out of the stomata, okay, called transpiration. So what happens is that, okay, that creates a pull on water, okay. So what happens is that cohesion, the forces of cohesion and adhesion come into effect. So what happens is that there's higher water potential in the soil. Water is at higher concentration in the soil than it is in the root. Okay, so water will move through osmosis into the root, okay, because it has to cross a cell membrane to get into the root, right? So then what happens is that the water molecules are stuck together, so they pull each other, okay? On the other end, at the leaf end, water is diffusing out through the stomate. Okay, so transpiration actually draws water from the leaf, okay, through the stomate, all right? So that creates a pull on the water molecules. That pretty much is the cohesion tension theory, okay, because these mesothelial cells with water on them, water is evaporating out through the stomates, and they're actually diffusing from one cell to another through osmosis, eventually coming to the vessel, right? Eventually coming to the xylem, okay? The xylem of the leaf is connected to the xylem of the stem. The xylem of the stem is connected to the xylem of the root. So what you have is a pull of water molecules. The evaporation of water molecules, okay, from the leaf actually creates a pull on the water molecules through the stem, from the root, from the soil. Okay, so that pretty much is actually cohesion and adhesion. So water evaporates, okay, out of the leaves, and the roots take water from the soil at the same time via osmosis. So the roots take water in through the soil via osmosis, because remember that generally the water needs to go through a membrane to get into the root, right? It needs to get through the cell wall and through the cell membrane to get into the root. From the root, it's actually pulled into the stem, it's pulled into the leaf, and it's pulled out of the leaf because the water potential outside of the leaf is lower than it is inside of the leaf, or there's a lower concentration of water outside the leaf than inside of the leaf. And because there's no membrane, you know, since the water diffuses through the stomate, okay, that's diffusion. Okay, so water diffuses out of the leaf, creating a pull, cohesion and adhesion. Cohesion, the water molecules sticking together. Adhesion, the water molecules sticking to the vessel elements and the tracheids, right? The sides of the tracheids and the sides of the vessel element. That's actually pulling the water from the root, and the root is pulling the water from the soil because the soil has higher water potential than the root does. Okay, it's as simple as that. Well, it's kind of complicated, but you know, still, you know, you got to learn this stuff. Okay. Okay, now stomates and guard cells. Okay, so a stomate has two guard cells, what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Okay, so they're these sausage-shaped cells, sort of like water balloons, okay, joined at the ends. So the stomate is open when turgor pressure is high, okay, when you have a lot of water in the guard cells. Okay, when turgor pressure is low, the stomate closes. Okay, so remember, guard cells also have chloroplasts. Guard cells are the only cells in the epidermis, because the guard cells are in the epidermis, okay, that have chloroplasts. Okay, remember what chloroplasts are. Okay, what do they do? Okay, think about it. Chloroplasts are organelles, and they do photosynthesis, right? What we talked about a little bit earlier. Okay. Now another important function of the stomate, of course, is to regulate gas exchange, like we talked about earlier. Carbon dioxide going into the stomate, oxygen gas coming out of the stomate, oxygen gas being a byproduct of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide being used in photosynthesis. Okay? And they also regulate transpiration. When the guard cells are open, water can transpire or evaporate out of the leaf through the pore known as the stomate, okay? And they close during water stress when there's not enough water in the guard cells, okay? And we talked about the potassium ions leave and water follows, okay? Now another important function of water in plants is the transport of food molecules, okay, through the phloem. So water is transported through the xylem, food is transported through the phloem, okay? So in the phloem, substances move about 40 inches per hour, which is too rapid for diffusion. Okay, so we have something called the pressure flow hypothesis. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, that means generally food will flow from a source such as a leaf, you know, where food is made, okay, and it goes to a sink where the food is stored, or where the food is used, okay. Okay, here we see generally you have here the source, which is a leaf cell producing sugar through these chloroplasts. Remember the chloroplasts? Doing photosynthesis, producing sucrose, okay, which a companion cell loads into the sieve tube member. Remember the companion cells in the sieve tube members, right? Remember the companion cells have a large nucleus. Sieve tube members usually do not when they're mature, even though they're alive, right? So then what happens is that when the sugar molecules go into the phloem, they're loaded into the phloem cells, the sieve tube members, okay, is actually at a high solute concentration. So what happens is that water actually through osmosis moves from the xylem into the phloem, okay? So that allows a large bulk of water here. Okay, so it has high water potential here, lower water potential at the sink. So what you have is mass flow of the sugar solution, sugar in water, okay, to what they call the sink, which can be, in this case, a root cell. Okay, so what happens is that the phloem, sieve tube members are unloaded with sugar at the companion cell, okay, which moves them into a sink cell, such as a root cell, okay. Then water, then through osmosis, leaves the septal membrane and goes back into the xylem, okay. And then the water thereafter is either transpired or recycled to be used again, okay. So you might be thinking that this is fairly complex, and it's like, why would people want to study something like this? Well, this is a way to actually figure out, okay, how diseases actually move in a plant. If you have an insect such as an aphid, okay, putting its starlet, its mouthpiece, into the phloem to suck out the sugar, that's actually what it does. That's what it feeds on, okay, these aphids, which are the bane of gardeners all over the world, okay. So these aphids, what they'll do is they'll actually stick their starlet into there, and what they can do when they're doing that is they can actually transfer viruses or bacteria into the plant. Okay, so if you can understand how sugar moves in the plant, you can also understand how viruses infect the plant and how bacteria can infect the plant, okay, and how you can sort of maybe prepare for that, or what you can do to prevent it. You need to control the pests is what you need to do, okay? You can't help it, okay? Now, our requirements for growth, okay, include light. Of course, plants need light to do photosynthesis. Plants also need the right temperature, okay? And generally, the plant needs soil, okay, generally, okay? So soil structure and minerals and other factors play roles in the growth of the plant, okay? So plants take up many elements from the soil, but besides the carbon and oxygen and hydrogen that it gets from water and carbon dioxide, there's only 15 elements that are essential to most plants. Okay, so we have what they call macronutrients. Okay, these are substances or minerals that are required in fairly large amounts. And what they do is they constitute about 0.5 to 3% of the dry weight of the plant. And these include nitrogen, potassium, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and sulfur, okay? So the nitrogen, potassium, calcium, and phosphorus actually account for 99% of the nutrient total that the plants actually need, okay? 99%, right? Now we also have micronutrients. Okay, these are elements needed in trace amounts, okay, very small amounts, some of them only in parts per million, okay? So here we'll have a little essential elements mnemonic, okay? A mnemonic is a way to remember, okay, or memorize something, okay? It's like a sentence, okay, giving you the abbreviations of the elements that are essential elements for plants, okay? C. Hopkins Cafe, mighty good, but not always clean. Come in, cousin Moby, okay? That's carbon, of course, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, sulfur, calcium, iron, magnesium, sodium, chlorine, copper, manganese, cobalt, zinc, molybdenum, and boron, okay? So remember, C. Hopkins Cafe, mighty good, not always clean. Common cousin Moby, okay? That's a mnemonic, okay? Now the thing too is generally plants, okay? See, we have just seen that plants need only 15 essential elements, okay? So you can actually grow plants without soil, right? There's a kind of field called hydroponics that allow you to grow a plant in a nutrient solution. Okay, as long as you have the right nutrients for the particular plants you're trying to grow, you can grow them. In fact, a lot of people grow manila lettuce, you know, different kinds of things, tomatoes, you know, in soilless medium. Okay, in aquatic medium, in hydroponics, because that actually cuts down on the number of pests that can infect the plants or infest the plants, okay? So now we'll have a little review. Okay, so what we did is we did diffusion and osmosis. We just talked about active transport briefly. We talked about water in plants in a little bit more depth. We talked about stomates, and we talked about essential elements. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to leave this subject of water in plants. Okay, and we're going to continue in terms of plant metabolism. Okay? So this is going to be plant metabolism, part 1. Okay? So the outline of topics includes metabolism, enzymes, and a prelude to photosynthesis, okay, which we'll cover next time. All right? So what is metabolism? Metabolism is a sum total of all the chemical reactions going on in a plant. Okay? So every cell in the plant has the genetic information that can program all the metabolism in the cells. Okay? So all these chemical reactions require energy. All right? So when a hibiscus flowers, when mangoes are produced on a tree, when leaves unfurl, or any other kind of work, any other kind of life activity occurs, okay, acquiring energy, releasing energy, and transferring energy from one form to another occurs. Okay? Recall that energy is the ability to do work. Okay? So plants and animals release energy during their lives. Okay? Energy is recycled or used by other organisms, right? Plants do photosynthesis and respiration, and animals do only respiration. Okay? Now enzymes, what do? They catalyze biochemical reactions. What does that mean? It means they speed up the reactions, they allow reactions to happen, and speed it up, lowering the activation energy that's needed to actually make the reaction go through. And these enzymes are not used up or not altered during the process. Okay? Here's a look at an enzyme. Remember, enzymes are proteins. Remember that from, seems like a long time ago, right? So enzymes are proteins, right? And what they do is they catalyze reactions, okay? So what they'll do is actually bond or bound to a substrate. Here's a 2-unit substrate that is bound into the active site, okay? The active site then changes shape slightly to allow induced fit, okay, to allow the substrate to fit more snugly in there. That creates a pressure on the bond between these two subunits. And then what happens is that the bond is broken, okay, and so you have products. So this is what they call a catabolic reaction, where you have a larger molecule becoming smaller molecules. So you have the end products where the two products actually being released from the site, and the enzyme is still unchanged. Look, the enzyme here and the enzyme here still looks the same. So the enzyme is not changed, okay, during the reactions that it actually helps the substrate go through. Okay, so it speeds up chemical reactions and it is not used up. So there are one or more specific enzymes, okay, for different metabolic activities. Okay, so enzymes regulate every metabolic activity. Okay, there are different enzymes that regulate each type of chemical reaction. Okay, so what we have is anabolism. We have smaller pieces being put together into making larger units, okay, with energy being input. That's called anabolism. How do you remember that? You can think of anabolic steroids, where guys or women, whoever uses them, bulk up, you know, football players, baseball players, basketball players, right? Sometimes some of them will use anabolic steroids, which are dangerous, okay, to bulk up, right? So you can build up, so you're actually making from a smaller molecules or smaller units into larger units. Okay, that's anabolism. Okay, catabolism is the inverse of that, where you get a larger molecule, okay, and the bonds between these units making up this larger molecule are actually released as energy, and then the subunits are actually made into smaller pieces. That's catabolism, okay? So most photosynthesis is anabolic in nature, okay? You actually make molecules that are stored for energy, such as sugar and starches, okay? Now most respiration is catabolic, okay, because they actually release energy from the chemical bonds, okay, between chemical bonds between that make up this larger unit, okay. Now oxidation reduction reactions, they're also known as redox reactions, happen both in photosynthesis and respiration. So both photosynthesis and respiration include many redox reactions, okay? So this is how you remember, okay, which is which, okay? What is the difference between oxidation and reduction? Okay, think Leo, Ger, okay? When you lose electrons, that's what is called oxidation. When you gain electrons, that's what you call reduction. Okay, Leo, Ger. Lose electrons is oxidation. Gain electrons is reduction. Okay? So generally, oxygen is usually the final acceptor of electrons. Okay, but oxidations can happen without oxygen being involved also. Okay, now the prelude to photosynthesis. Okay, so oil and coal. Okay, 90% of the oil and coal that we use in our modern day is used for transportation, such as fuel for trucks and ships, and also planes. Okay, used for communications. Okay, used for factories, and used for electricity for appliances. Okay. Now generally, this oil and coal came from the sun. It was this oil and coal, the energy in it was originally captured by plants and algae and cyanobacteria. Okay, cyanobacteria from the sun. Okay, and were transformed into fossil fuels by geological processes. Okay, so cyanobacteria, algae, and plants. Plants, algae, and cyanobacteria. Those are the organisms that do photosynthesis. Those are the only organisms on the planet that do photosynthesis. Animals don't do photosynthesis. Fungi don't do photosynthesis. Okay? Also, cyanobacteria are also known as the blue-green bacteria. They're also known as the blue-green algae. Okay? Now, photosynthesis is the sole means of sustaining life. Okay? So every cell needs energy to stay alive, right? So more energy is needed when the cell or the organism needs to do reproduction or growth or some kind of physical work. Okay? So the photosynthate, that's actually the product of photosynthesis, is used by the plant to make wood or fibers or other structures in the plant. It's also used in the plant to make sucrose. Remember, sucrose is a form of sugar that the plant usually is transporting in itself. Also, photosynthate is used to make starch, which is a deposition product of the plant that actually the plant uses to store energy. Okay. Photosynthate is also used to make amino acids for proteins. Okay. Now 40 or 50% of photosynthesis occurs in water. Okay. And also 40 to 50% of the oxygen originates in the oceans and lakes of the world. This is a nice image kind of showing areas where there's an abundance of chlorophylls A, okay, where this area is shaded here. That's where there's a lot of algae. Okay, that's where you have reefs and algae kind of congregating and doing photosynthesis. Chlorophyll, of course, being the molecule that actually helps and enables photosynthesis. And so macroalgae and microalgae. So microalgae are microscopic algae, okay, and macroalgae are larger algae that are multicellular, okay? Now cells need energy to do work, okay? So the molecule of energy in the cell is called adenosine triphosphate, also known as ATP, adenosine triphosphate, ATP, okay? It constantly needs replenishment. It needs to be made all the time. Millions of them are made in every cell in our bodies, okay, and in plants' bodies. So plants make ATP using light, okay? They're like a solar-powered engine, okay? So without light, ATP production stops. And of course, ATP production happens in the chloroplasts, okay? So if ATP production stops, then what are the plant is going to do? Because plants actually store energy in sugar molecules and starch molecules for energy storage. Okay, so plants can actually do without the sun during the night, but they can't do without the sun during the day, to kind of make an obvious sort of statement. Okay, now the equation for photosynthesis, okay, 6 carbon dioxides plus 12 waters plus light, okay, in the presence of chlorophyll and enzymes in the plant, makes glucose. C6H12O6 is glucose, okay, plus oxygen gas plus water, 6 water, okay. So light energy, okay, stored in sugar, okay, is made from carbon dioxide from the air and water that's absorbed by the plant through the roots, okay. Oxygen gas is released, okay, as a byproduct of photosynthesis and diffuses out of the stomates into the atmosphere. So the main players in the process of photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, water, light, and chlorophyll. And we're going to go into that a little bit, these things a little bit, okay? Now carbon dioxide actually makes up 0.039% of the atmosphere, okay? That's about 390 parts per million, okay? So there's about 78% of the atmosphere made of nitrogen, about 21% oxygen. There's a little bit of hydrogen, helium, argon, and neon. But carbon dioxide is actually a limiting factor in photosynthesis, okay? So greenhouses pump carbon dioxide into the greenhouse, okay? That leads to a 20% increase, okay, in production, in the growth of plants, in the production, in like commercial production of plants and plant parts, okay, plant products such as fruits and vegetables or foliage plants, okay. Now the use of fossil fuels, what that allows is more carbon dioxide to go into the atmosphere. That can increase photosynthesis and increase food production, but also insects, bacteria, and viruses can proliferate with warmer temperatures, okay. You have an increase in respiration and decomposition with warmer temperatures, okay. And what that does is it increases carbon dioxide in the environment. Okay, and carbon dioxide is actually a greenhouse gas, right? And is actually implicated in global warming, too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay. Now water, okay, the second part of our equation. Okay. So less than 1% of the water taken up by the plant is actually used in photosynthesis. Most of the water is transpired, okay? Here's a nice image showing precipitation from the clouds here in the form of rain. and it hits some bare soil as well as hitting plant roots, okay, in the soil. So you have some evaporation and you have a lot of transpiration. So transpiration has a lot to do with the global cycling of water. So transpiration is necessary, even though you might think, wow, only 1% of the water that the plant takes up, or less than that, is actually used in photosynthesis. But transpiration is important, okay? So water is also incorporated into the cytoplasm, vacuoles, and other organelles in the plant. We have the cell walls, the cell membrane, the nucleus, the ER, remember all these things? The Golgi apparatus, chloroplast, mitochondria, okay, central vacuole. Okay, this is all sort of reminders. Okay, we don't see the cytoskeleton here, but the cytoskeleton is also there too. Okay, so it's incorporated into the cytoplasm and vacuoles, right? It's also the source of electrons and oxygen gas. Okay, so this is actually showing the light reactions of photosynthesis, which we'll go into next time. Okay, so what you have is that water, which comes in here, is actually split by light, and oxygen gas is given off. This is where oxygen gas is given off, and then electrons are passed down an electron transport system. Okay, so we'll go into this more next time, and also hydrogen ions are freed up to be put through a proton pump, okay? And then the protons then diffuse back across the membrane through an ATP synthase that results in the production of ATP, okay? So we'll go into this in more detail next time, okay? Now, what happens if there's not enough water, okay? If there's not enough water, water may become a limiting factor in photosynthesis. Okay, what will happen is the stomates will close, and that decreases the carbon dioxide available for photosynthesis, so photosynthesis will slow down or stop in many cases. Okay, now light. Okay, light is both a wave and a particle. Okay, so 40% of radiant energy is actually visible light that we can see. Okay, so visible light is a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, the lowest energy part of the electromagnetic spectrum are radio waves. The highest energy part of the electromagnetic spectrum are gamma rays. Okay, of course we can't see either of those. Gamma rays are very damaging. Okay. Now, the visible light of the electromagnetic energy is actually like the white light of the sunlight, and if you diffract it through a prism, you'll actually come up with these colors of the rainbow. Okay? So red is a longer wavelength and it also has lower energy. Okay, so the wavelength and energy are inversely proportional to each other. Okay? So red has a longer wavelength and lower energy, and violet has a shorter wavelength and higher energy. Okay? So yellows and greens are between red and violet, so this is part of the visible spectrum. Okay? Now violet to blue and red-orange to red are actually the parts of the spectrum that the plant absorbs most of the light. So violet to blue and red-orange to red, that's where the plant absorbs most of the light in this spectrum. Okay, so why do leaves look green to us? Okay, it's because leaves, yellows and greens, right, and blues are between red and violet. Blue and violet are absorbed, red and orange are absorbed. What happens is that green is reflected and transmitted by leaves. That's why what happens is that white light is actually hitting a leaf. Blue and violet are being absorbed. Orange and red are being absorbed. And what's being reflected and what hits our eye, it looks green to us. Okay? It's because green light is transmitted and reflected. Reflected and transmitted. Okay? So if you have too intense light, okay, so different plants have different light intensity needs. Okay, so herbaceous plants that live under the forest cover can live with about 2% full daylight. Now most plants actually growing in full sunlight need at least 30% of full sunlight in order to grow optimally. Okay, so if you have too intense light, that'll change the ratio of carbon dioxide to oxygen gas inside of the leaves. That may lead to something called photorespiration. What is photorespiration? That's when the plant uses oxygen gas and releases carbon dioxide. Okay, so here's the Calvin cycle, which is part of photosynthesis, where carbon dioxide is taken in. Okay, and eventually what that leads to is a production of sugars. But in photorespiration, oxygen gas is actually used, okay, and what is released is carbon dioxide. Okay, so it's a wasteful sort of product. Okay, it actually uses up ATP too. You can see that ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is going to ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, actually loss of phosphate group. Okay, so also you can cause photooxidation. Okay, photooxidation causes the chlorophyll to go to an excited state. Okay, and energy that's released from the chlorophyll is passed on to the oxygen. Okay, which becomes reactive and then actually bleaches the chlorophyll. So you have chlorophyll breakdown. Okay, so this is a plant from normal lighting, and this is a plant in which photooxidation has happened. So you can see the plant looks like it's dying. Okay. Now the last part of the equation that we need to talk about is chlorophyll. Okay. Chlorophyll is similar in structure to the heme of hemoglobin. Okay, you can see they're similar to each other, except chlorophyll has a magnesium atom in the center. Okay, that's one big difference. And heme has iron in the center. Okay, so heme is actually carries oxygen in the blood, and lends it actually pigment lends a red pigment to make the blood red, the red blood cells red, and the blood red itself. Okay. Now chlorophylls, okay, come in at least two types, actually more. You have chlorophyll A, which is blue-green, and here you can see that it has a long lipid tail that allows it to anchor itself in the thylakoid membrane. Remember thylakoids? There's a coin-shaped stacks of membrane in the grana of the chloroplast, right? So chlorophyll A tends to be blue-green, and chlorophyll B tends to be yellow-green. You see they both have the magnesium in the center, but they're a little bit different in shape. Okay, so the chloroplasts of most plants have two types of chlorophylls usually, both chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Okay, and basically the chloroplasts have about 3 times more chlorophyll A than chlorophyll B. So when chlorophyll B actually absorbs light, okay, it eventually transfers the energy to a chlorophyll A molecule. Okay, so because chlorophyll B is yellow-green, it allows the spectra of absorptance to be wider, okay, than if there was only chlorophyll A, which is blue-green. Okay. Now other pigments include the carotenoids, which we talked about before. Okay, such as carotenes, which are orange to red, and the xanthophylls, which are yellow to brown. Okay, so in the chloroplasts, there are about 250 to 400 pigment molecules, and they're grouped into what they call a light harvesting complex called a photosynthetic unit. Okay, the photosynthetic units are then aggregated into what we call photosystems. And we'll be talking about more about photosystems next time. Okay, other pigments include phycobilins, okay, which are blue and red in color, bluish and reddish in color. They occur in the cyanobacteria and in the red algae. Here's a cyanobacterium and red alga. Okay. Also in algae, there may be chlorophyll C, chlorophyll D, and maybe chlorophyll E. Okay. Okay, in algae. Right. Now for review. Okay, so in this part of the lecture, we covered a little bit about metabolism, we did a little bit about enzymes, and we did a little bit about photosynthesis. Okay? So I would encourage you to not feel too intimidated. I know this is hard material. I know this is difficult, but you can always contact me, okay, via email, via phone, or come to my office, and we can go over it. Okay, you can actually record the lectures and replay them and tape them again. And view them again, right? And but please remember to contact me if you feel you need any help. Okay. Anyway, that's all that we have for you today. Hope that you enjoyed today's lesson as much as I did. It was challenging, but it was fun. Okay. So we'll see you next time. Bye bye.